carry your water bottle?
No, I'm not missing it. Of course, being juniors, very nice including
Oh, they do not. What a load of bollocks. Perhaps nobody doesn't see today being able to carry it through. It's Melbourne bollocks.
I thought the custom intent was that silks don't carry things that the juniors do.
That must have been 250 years ago, and all you Melbourneites still hold on to it. You're supposed to call yourself a patriot. We're actually the one referred to the magistrate.
I'm an SC there. I share that view.
Thank you, sir.
I'm a small number who refuse to adopt empirical correspondence.
We have veteran bartender where one coach is now a judge dressed up as David and talked about the need to go back to play cases.
All stand. Coronial closed down session. Please be seated.
This will be Acting Sergeant Shane McCormack. Before I call Sergeant McCormack, I understand that Mr. Gack has something that he wants to say in relation to the non-publication order. Sure. Thank you, Your Honour.
And the non-publication order is in force, the interim non-publication order is in force until further order of the court.
Thank you, Your Honour. I must thank Learned Counsel assisting in regards to the error that occurred overnight in regards to the publication of the transcript, the swift action she took once it was brought to her attention, so I thank her for that. Your Honour, I just thought I'm seeking to be excused immediately after addressing you. I just thought it would be fair to the parties. A further matter I just wanted to address in response to the written outlines that were submitted overnight. It's a very narrow point, but if there is some suggestion that the inquest is being conducted in a secretive way, it's my submission that suggestion is entirely invalid. The inquest is being conducted in an entirely open way. Yesterday's evidence of my client, although the live stream was cut, evidence was in open court with the family able to be in court and most certainly with the family's lawyers present in court. And that's relevant in my submission in regards to a very narrow aspect of my application in regards to those authorities that I would refer to in my written outline, where when there is a removal of the open justice principles, it should only be done to the extent that it is necessary. And in my submission, those matters are entirely relevant when assessed with the narrow type of the application that I'm making. So I just wanted to put that on record in fairness to my learned colleagues. And seek your leave to be excused.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, as we have received further submissions, I won't be making a final decision on that matter today, so it will be dealt with sometime next week.
Thank you.
Your Honour, just to say that NARJ is adopting Walker in support of the submissions of Walker Lane, Robinson family, Brown family, and the committee.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Coronial.
Acting Sergeant Shane McCormack.
Morning.
Take a seat. Acting Sergeant, do you promise to tell the truth to the court?
I do, and Your Honour, it's Senior Constable.
Oh, Senior Constable. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Senior Constable McCormack, can I just ask you to say your full name for the record?
Shane Anthony McCormack.
Okay,
occasionally known as Paddy format.
Paddy, yes.
Now, your substantive rank is a senior constable, is that correct?
Correct.
But from time to time, you've acted up into higher ranks,
Correct.
including the rank of acting sergeant.
Correct.
Now, you provided a number of documents to the inquest. I might just identify them for the record. The first document is a recorded statement that you gave on the 21st of November 2019. Does that sound about right?
It does, yes.
That's 7-95. Second was a recorded statement on the 29th of January 2020.
Yes.
7-96. And you also gave evidence at trial on 14th of February 2032.
I did. Yep.
And the transcript of the examination and cross-examination, Your Honour, is 7-96 capital A. Can I ask you where you're currently stationed, Senior Constable?
I'm stationed in Casuarina Station up in Darwin.
And what type of role do you fulfill at Casuarina Station?
Currently, I'm working on a special project, the new police database system.
I take it that wasn't the role that you were in November 2019.
No, it wasn't.
Where were you stationed at that time?
I was stationed in Alice Springs, and at that time, I was the acting sergeant for point of sale intervention.
Right. I think that you've abbreviated that as a posse sergeant.
Posse, correct, yes.
Can you just tell Your Honour what that involves?
Yes, Your Honour, it involves all the auxiliaries that work at the bottle shops. So we'll pick that Saturday, so we have all the bottle shops need to be manned until 9:30 in the evening. So looking after the welfare, making sure they got what they need, making sure the meal breaks are looked after, making sure they have proper support. So it's pretty full on.
You said it's a full-on role. I take it that you're pretty busy, or we're pretty busy.
It's probably the busiest role you can do on a Saturday.
Okay. Saturdays are busy days for drinking in Alice Springs.
Yeah, it's busiest, and the bottle shops are open for longer.
You might not be able to remember, I can refresh your memory if you can't, but how many staff did you have on that Saturday?
On that day, I did look at the roster last week. We had, I think it was 14 auxiliaries and 2 constables in a cage, but normally you'd have 6 constables and 14 auxiliaries.
What type of contact? I take it that the majority of the auxiliaries and the constables during the day are stationed at points of sale.
They are, with the constables, we'll try and run 3 cages, 3 police vehicles. By having the extra, so we have to have 1 cage as support in case something important happens. But with the other 2 cages, is more that they'll go around and replace batteries, give water to the guys, and cover the meal breaks. But that day we only had 1 cage.
Can I just ask you, what do you end up doing on a day like that Saturday, the 9th of November? I take it you're not at point of sale?
No, a lot of times I'll try and cover meal breaks. So the staff are predominantly only rostered till 7:30 in the evening, but the bottle shop's open till 9. So that becomes an issue in itself.
So you might cover at the end of the shift?
Well, yeah, there's 12 bottle shops. I can't.
Can I just ask you what you would be doing during the day? I mean,
Lots. A completely admin role. Yeah.
Picking up a telephone call, fielding
Telephones, emails, giving support on the radio. Yeah, jack of all trades for that day, really.
and a lot of information coming in and out.
Yeah, definitely.
In 2019, you were also a member of the IRT. Is that correct?
Correct.
I think you estimate you'd been a member for about 1.5 years at that time.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
How did you become a member of the IRT?
It was an expression of interest. You had to submit a memo, which then got reviewed by, I think it was then Senior Sergeant Mike Williams, and there was a member from the association, and there could have been one other person who'd review your memo.
Who was Mike Williams?
Mike Williams was a Senior Sergeant in Alice Springs at the time, Your Honour.
And was he affiliated with the NTPA or IRT?
IRT, yes.
Okay.
Was he, there's been some evidence that Sergeant Lee Bowens was the OIC or de facto OIC of the IRT.
Yeah.
Was Mike Williams in a quote unquote management or leadership role?
He was a senior sergeant, and Lee Bones was a sergeant, so.
Within the structure of the IRT, not so much the
Yeah.
ordinary chain of command structure.
Yeah.
Was he OIC, 2IC, team leader? Can you remember?
I can't remember.
Okay. What went in your memo when you applied for membership of the IRT?
I think it was why I wanted to join, what experience I've done, and I'd imagine it would have asked why I think I'd be a good fit for the team.
Can I ask you about what the type of experience you highlighted for the purpose of that application was?
Type of experience. So I was previously a police officer in New Zealand. When I was over there, we have Armed Defender Squad, which I did the selection course for, but I didn't get chosen after that. But I volunteered a lot of my time with the Armed Defenders. So I think when it was able to show a basis, that was something that I was always interested in.
Okay. Did you have any prior military experience?
No.
When you were explaining to Senior Sergeant Mike Williams and the others reviewing your application why you thought you'd be a good fit for the IRT, can you remember what you said?
Well, it wasn't a formal interview, it was just a memo. Yeah. Remember what I said? Well, I suppose you're only going to say good things about yourself. Probably the type of person I am. I'm easygoing, I do work well with people, I take instruction quite well. I also believe, I'm compassionate. I like what I do, care about people.
In addition to those commendable qualities, would you have highlighted things like, you're hardworking?
I would, yes, yeah.
You good under stress?
Yep.
I mean, the nature of the IRT is that they deal with generally more stressful situations than a GD's officer might do.
Potentially.
Higher risk.
No, I'd probably say general duties is probably the most stressful. General duties, you don't actually know what you're going to. So you could go to a noise complaint job, which just really is 20 people angry and drunk and really aggressive. But the job just comes in as a noise complaint.
Whereas the IRT might require a more structured and tactical approach.
Yeah, and there'll probably be a bit more knowledge behind why the IRT are there.
Okay. And you'd expect that when the IRT is deployed, that there would be a high degree of forethought and planning.
Yes, generally.
You, I think, became, and there's some uncertainty in your recorded statements, became a team leader of the IRT.
When?
Prior to November 2019.
No, I don't think so.
Can you describe your role within the IRT?
We kind of all had similar roles. But as for team leader, no. Like, it really depends on what the job is you're going to and what you're being allocated. You could have a person who be allocated to make sure the forced entry kit is all organised. Someone could get the shields. It really was what was delegated on the day.
At one point in your recorded statement, you were asked what your role was within the IRT. The answer was, that's a tricky one. Why was it tricky for you to identify what your role was within the IRT?
Because roles are really depending on who is actually available when they arrive for a job. Do you get me?
I do.
Yeah.
So on an ongoing basis,
Yeah.
you didn't have a consistent role within
No,
the IRT?
no.
But you were known as someone who knew a fair bit about the IRT.
I suppose it's kind of a hard question. I don't know what people would know me as.
I suppose what I'm getting at, and I'll be blunt, is
Yeah.
Why do you think it fell to you to coordinate the deployment of the IRT on the 9th of November?
Oh, okay. So we're getting to that, right. It was Probably because I was at work when the phone call came in.
And because you just happened to be acting up in the sergeant position.
Yeah, there was one other. Well, the deployment really kind of depended on what type of deployment it was going to be. I knew one that I'm confused whether it was Lee Bones was on night shift or one was on leave or Jason Locke was on night shift. I'm confused. But it really depends on what it was. So at that stage, it's like there's no way I was going to call whoever was on night shift until I found out what it was, and that's when I spoke to Superintendent Nobbs.
It might refresh your memory, but there's been evidence that Lee Bowens was on leave.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Had you not been involved in the IRT, would it have fallen to any other ordinary member of the IRT to coordinate the deployment on the 9th of November?
Yeah, I'd imagine.
So, for example, Constable Rolfe might have received the telephone call, and with 3 years experience as a police officer in the Northern Territory, could have been tasked with deploying the IRT.
Yeah, but when you say deploying the IRT, there's probably a lot more to deploying the IRT. So it's like, and I know I've said in my statement, it wasn't actually an IRT deployment.
I want to come to that.
Yeah.
But you received a telephone call from Superintendent Nobbs.
No, so Superintendent Nobbs rang Sean Finesse, Senior Sergeant Sean Finesse. Sean Finesse came in next door where the posse room is, and he said, who's the point of contact for IRT? It could have been something like that. I might have said something similar. And I said, well, I suppose it'd be me. I said, what do you need? And I went into the room, and then that's when I had a conversation with Superintendent Nobbs and Sean Finesse.
So I just want to be clear about what you understood your role to be. You were a mere point of contact, is that correct?
Well, I was the point of contact to actually find out what the point of contact would be, I suppose.
But you didn't find another point of contact, did you?
No,
Okay. So you were the point of contact.
I became the point of contact, yes.
Okay. What does the point of contact do?
With anyone or with this one in particular?
With this one in particular.
I did what was asked of me.
Okay. But I guess what I'm trying to clarify is, were you making operational decisions about who was suitable for deployment?
No,
What the plan should involve?
no.
You were simply relaying things from one person to another?
Yeah, I was like the conduit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just like Sean Finesse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
I want to go back. I was asking you some general questions about your role in the IRT and how you became a team leader, and you explained that you weren't a team leader, you were just a member of the IRT.
Yeah.
So it's fair to say, and I think you said this at page 48 of your first recorded statement, you'd received no training regarding working in this deployment role.
No.
It had never been explained to you what one does when one receives a telephone call from a superintendent of police and is told, I want you to coordinate a deployment of the IRT for me.
Well, it wasn't actually those words that were asked, so I kind of asked Superintendent Nobbs what he wanted.
Okay. I want to come to what was said. I want to focus on your training for the time being.
Sure.
You had received absolutely no training in being the point of contact or deploying the IRT. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, I think you've given evidence that you couldn't recall whether Sergeant Lee Bounds was on leave.
Yep. But yep.
But I take it that there had been no formal handover of quote unquote command of the IRT or anything like that.
No.
Okay. And you would be aware that ordinarily he was the point of contact,
Who was?
Sergeant Lee Bounds?
Yes.
But what he did when he was contacted by someone like Superintendent Nobbs was something that he knew and you didn't know about.
Correct.
Okay. I want to ask you some more general questions about training. I think your evidence was that there's some preliminary training when you become a member of the IRT.
Yeah, there is. So we'd go to range at least once a month. And that really depends what your rostering was. Sometimes I went to the range with RT when I wasn't rostered, so that was in my own time. And then we'd have other training days where you do forced entries, cordon and contain, just stuff like that.
And roughly how long does that initial training take?
Oh, sorry. I'm wrong there, Your Honour. Sorry. We did 2-week induction course for it.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
And thereafter, every now and then, there might be a rostered training day.
Yes, correct.
But you say in your recorded statement they weren't mandatory.
No.
And they weren't necessarily delivered on days where people were rostered so that they could attend them.
Correct.
So it was ad hoc.
Probably not ad hoc, is that it really boils down to when you can get so many people together, when the range is available. You did have a lot of members doing them in their own time. If you were rostered on and you could get a train day, that was great. Well, you're getting paid for it, so yeah.
Who would lead the training on the training days you did?
Predominantly Sergeant Bones.
Okay. Now, you note in your first record of interview at page 88 that a number of members of the IRT had different backgrounds.
Yes.
Some of them Defence Force backgrounds.
Yep.
And that you tried to lean on people's skills,
Of course.
including the skills that they developed in the military.
Yeah.
Okay. And in the context of training, your evidence was on that occasion that Luke Bevan, who was he?
Luke Bevan was one of the members of RT, ex-Army, I believe, and really well experienced with practically everything.
I think that's consistent with your recorded statement. You say Luke Bevan was doing it. He's ex-Army as well, and
Yep.
I know on training days he'd take training days because he was actually quite knowledgeable.
He was, yeah.
But he wasn't a team leader either.
No.
And what you're saying there effectively is that in light of his military experience, he was quite knowledgeable
Yep.
in the skills necessary to perform the function of an IRT member.
Yep.
Use of weaponry.
Yep.
Entry into buildings.
Yep.
Cordon and contain.
Yes.
Siege situations.
Yes.
Military skills that you use when apprehending a very high-risk offender.
For example, what were the military skills?
Well, you tell me, you're the specialist.
Well, I wouldn't really say we're using military skills. It's not like the information the ex-Army guys brought were kind of more about trying to really keeping us safe. Like I remember one instance when we were out at the range and we were talking about walking in formation and how we would walk, how it's safer, how we can keep an eye on each other, and how also that can be brought over to search and rescue.
They'd also provide you some instruction on how to stay safe when, for example, entering a building
Yes.
where there might be a person who's armed with a firearm.
Yeah, I'd probably rather not go into a building with a firearm, but yeah, sometimes, that's what you sign up for. Sometimes, Your Honour, you just have to, but
I'm not
yeah,
saying that
I agree, we would receive.
Normally for IRT, you'd expect cordon and contain, and if it was known there was something more serious inside, you'd hope that TRG would arrive.
Correct. You'd rather, yeah. I like my body. I don't want to.
I'm not suggesting to you that you'd necessarily enter the building.
Yep.
But a part of that safety training from someone like Luke Bevan might be, look, in my experience as an ex-military officer, you don't go into a building where you know that there's an armed insurgent, for example.
Yeah, like we did as part of our training, we did have an immediate action plan where you're waiting for, you do cordon contain, you're waiting for TRG, it's a hostage situation in there. How long do you wait? Sometimes the decision would have to be made that you're going in. So that's probably more of it.
Now, I accept that they are two different fields of study and expertise, but there is obviously some crossover between the types of specialist skills the military employ and the types of specialist skills you were using in the IRT. Would you agree?
Some crossover. I don't know.
You don't know.
I've never been in the army, so.
Your evidence is certainly that you were relying on people like Luke Bevan, who were knowledgeable because they'd been in the army, to teach you the skills you needed.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean the skills we're learning are army skills.
You don't know.
Well, I can't see how to be teaching army skills when in the police force. I don't know. Like at the end of the day, I imagine in the army, clearing house is clearing a house, formation is formation. That'd be the same with policing. But in the army, they're not going in to arrest someone. We are.
Are you acquainted with the IRT SOPs?
I am now.
Do I take it from your answer that you weren't acquainted with them on the 9th of November?
No, I knew we had them, but no, I can't say I knew them that well.
I think that you were asked whether you were acquainted with them, and you said, I was aware of them.
Yeah. If I said that, yeah.
You're aware they existed?
Yes, sure.
So they weren't taught as part of the team training.
And no. Not that I can recall, Your Honour.
All right. This was the only, using it in quotation marks, formal document that regulated the deployment of the IRT. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. And it's not something that members of the IRT were taught?
No, I don't think so.
And it's not something that you, a member of the IRT, whose responsibility it was to be point of contact
Yep.
on the 9th of November, knew very much about.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, yeah.
You are aware though, or you've been made aware since 9th of November of the contents of the document.
I have.
I think a folder has been prepared. Can I ask you to just go to tab 4? There are a couple of emails in the front that we'll talk about in a moment.
What colour? Oh, yeah, here we go. Yep.
All right. The first thing I want to ask you about is can you see on page 9 of that document?
Yes.
There's a heading at the top of the page, 3.1.6, responsibilities.
Yep.
And the first line reads, it's the responsibility of the OIC, 2IC and team leaders too, and then there's a colon.
Yep.
Who was the OIC?
Lee Bones.
And who was the 2IC?
Sorry, the 2IC?
2IC.
I don't know.
Is it possible there wasn't one?
Possibly.
Okay. And what about the team leaders?
I don't know.
Okay. Again, is it possible that apart from Lee Bowens, everyone within the IRT really had a kind of fluid role as member and potential point of contact?
Yeah, it kind of really depends on who you can get in. Like the issue of you allocating team leaders and then all of a sudden you want 10 people for an IRT job and you have no team leaders available. So it's kind of like you really, it's like we're not a dedicated team for this. It's like you get who you can get sometimes.
So the difficulty you see with allocating a 2IC and team leaders is that on a particular day when the IRT needs to be deployed, it might be thought that each IRT deployment needs a team leader.
Does it say that here?
No, it doesn't say that.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm just trying to unpick what you've just said. You've said we can't always get a team leader. Are you saying that it would give rise to effectively rostering issues if every time you sent the IRT out you needed a team leader?
Correct.
Okay. That's not what this is talking about, though. This is talking about the responsibilities of the OIC, 2IC and team leaders effectively to oversee the IRT, you'd agree?
Yeah.
To do things like ensure the skill level and competency of each member is maintained.
Yep.
Okay. To ensure each member of the team is current with all OSTT and IRT requalifications.
Yes.
To oversee the correct and safe conduct of any training undertaken in line with OH&S requirements.
Yep.
Okay. And to conduct other training. That's effectively a responsibility that fell solely to Lee Bowens.
He was the OIC, yes.
But in the absence of the 2IC and team leaders, it was Lee Bowens and Lee Bowens.
Yes.
Okay. The next thing I wanted to ask you about in that document is and so just to clarify, and while Lee Bowles was on leave, those responsibilities fell to no one.
A possible would have been Jason Locke, but I don't know what conversation Lee Bones and Jason Locke would have had.
Can I ask you to turn back to page 4?
Yeah.
What I want to do now is ask you some questions about operations and deployment.
Yeah.
Specifically, high-risk deployments
Yep.
and general support operations. Before I ask you the questions, would you agree that the designation of these two types of deployment as high-risk and general support operations can lead to a bit of confusion?
In what way?
Perhaps I'll put it to you this way. General support operations involve specialist skills, correct?
General duty support?
Sorry. Okay, let's do it this way. The first category is a high-risk deployment. You
Yeah.
agree?
Yep.
And that specifically refers to incidents involving sieges,
Yep.
hostages,
Yep.
active shooters,
Yep.
a barricaded person,
Yep.
civil disorder where death or injury has or is likely to occur. You agree?
Correct. Yep.
All right. So the degree of risk is very, very high, you'd agree?
Yep.
And the degree of specialist training that would be required for an operation of that kind would also be quite significant.
Yes.
Now, a high-risk deployment requires authorisation at the Assistant Commissioner level.
Correct.
That's a reflection of the seriousness of that type of deployment.
Yep.
When you deploy in that capacity, you deploy with, it is mandatory to take full IRT kit, you'd agree?
Correct.
Including your camos.
Yep.
Everyone goes out with patrol rifles or beanbag shotguns or the like.
Yep.
You wear siege helmets, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that is maybe the word is problematic, but almost a paramilitary style deployment, you'd agree?
Paramilitary.
I won't press the question, it's problematic.
Yeah. I'm from Ireland, so paramilitary means something a bit different.
Fair enough. General support operations, and you can turn over the page. Now, the IRT is available to assist other units in certain circumstances, you'd agree?
Is this 1.2?
This is.
Yep. Yep.
And that assistance includes the arrest of violent offenders,
Yep.
persons who have escaped or are evading police custody,
Correct.
targeted operations, armed offenders,
Yep.
re-establishing order following civil unrest. Third last point. You agree?
Yep. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
Southern Command support at a large-scale community disorder.
Yep.
So you'd agree that while it's not a quote-unquote high-risk deployment, the level of risk can still be quite high during a general support operation. You'd agree?
Yes.
Okay. And you are being deployed as the IRT.
Are we talking about from November?
1.2 general support operations.
Yeah.
The IRT is available to assist other units.
Yes.
It is the IRT that is being deployed.
Yeah, as per this, yes.
Yes. And indeed, an authority needs to be obtained from the relevant superintendent, from the Southern Commando.
Correct.
Okay. You would agree that the IRT is deployed in situations such as these because they have specialist tactical experience.
Yes.
And you'd agree that when deployed, they are deployed frequently with weapons that a general duties officer doesn't use on the streets of Alice Springs.
Can you say what weapons?
An
Because
AR-15, a beanbag shotgun.
yeah. So the reason that Alice Springs members don't, well, I've taken the beanbag out as the general duties in Alice Springs. It's non-legal. Why wouldn't you? But I'll agree with the AR-15. Yes.
In this case, the AR-15 was specifically authorised by Assistant Commissioner Worst. Were you aware of that?
On which case?
On the 9th of November, you were informed by Superintendent Nobbs, were you not, that Assistant Commissioner Worst had approved the deployment of AR-15s?
No.
Would you agree that the availability of those weapons to the IRT means that in addition to their specialist expertise, they are deemed to be responsible enough to use weapons such as these in the community?
Just for IRT members?
During an IRT deployment, one
Yeah.
of the reasons that an approval is required is that they might be required to do more or exercise specialist skills that an ordinary general duties member doesn't possess.
I don't really know how to answer that.
Is it really
Because
your...
general duties officers are also trained in AR-15s.
Is it really your evidence that you think that the only reason you were calling the IRT is that they might have picked up the telephone on the 9th of November?
The only reason I was calling the members.
Well, you called, in addition to the IRT members who were actually deployed on the 9th of November,
Yeah.
I think something like 4 other members of the IRT.
Correct.
Were you calling around just any old general duties officer who wasn't in the IRT?
Oh no, I was because I was asked to get full members from the IRT.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you asked to get 4 members of the IRT.
From the IRT.
So you're saying that the request was 4 members of the IRT, but you weren't asked to deploy the IRT?
4 members from the IRT.
Is it just coincidence that they happen to be in the IRT?
Well, the reason you'd ring the members from the IRT, Your Honour, is because you know they'll answer.
And it has absolutely nothing to do with their specialist training.
Well, it is.
Experience.
Well, the fact is that nobody else, you cannot ring other cops. So we don't have anyone who makes themselves available to technically be on call without and getting any allowances for it. But you know with the IRT, when you ring them, and if they are the IRT guys, if you ring them and they are available, they will come in. So it's like, you mean, I've done it in the past where you ring a police officer who's not in the IRT and you ring about something else and they'll complain down the phone that they're not working, why you're ringing me, etc. But with the IRT, it's either they'll answer, and if they answer and they're not available, they're not available. There's no complaining about it, if you know what I mean.
So I understand that that's one of the advantages of calling in the IRT, but I do want you to think about and answer my question. The question is, did it have nothing to do with the specialist training and skill the IRT possessed?
I think that's probably not an answer for me, because then that would be trying to say what Superintendent Nobbs' decision was.
Yeah. What was in your mind?
Well,
I thought it was completely coincidental. It was just about the fact that they'd pick up the telephone call.
Well, there was nothing in my mind. He said I want 4 members from IRT.
Why did you think it needed approval?
Need approval from who?
From the Commander Southern, in this case, Assistant Commissioner Worst.
Well, I never said it. Need approval from him.
Well, we'll go to some of the evidence of your conversations between yourself and Superintendent Nobbs, but is it your evidence that you were never told that an approval had been given by Assistant Commissioner Worst?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
But we're going back 3 years, so.
Would, in any event, there was no doubt in your mind, was there, that the level of risk for this deployment was high?
Well, not necessarily. At the end of the day, it's for this one, you just have an arrest target in community. So it's not like it was a firearm incident or anything.
So it was actually just a kind of standard arrest.
Yeah, like it was. Like, you mean, I obviously know about the acts incident, but you mean, you arrest people to do it with weapons all the time. Most times they're doing it as general duties, but
You gave evidence about this at trial, you recall?
I recall being at trial, I can't really recall what I said.
You were asked precisely the question I just asked you. In your mind, what was the level of risk for this deployment? And you answered it was high risk.
Yeah.
Were you asked that question? Did you give that answer?
If you're saying I did, then I would have.
Okay, do you want to reconsider the evidence you just gave
Yeah.
years after the fact?
Can you ask me the previous question again,
The
please?
question was, what was the level of risk for this deployment? Was it high? And you said no, not necessarily. Your evidence at trial was that it was a high risk. What's happened in the intervening years?
But that, okay. I don't know.
You've obviously had a long time to think about events.
A long time's passed, I've tried not to think about it.
Okay. Is it the case that do you feel like minimising the perceived risk excuses or might excuse any perception that your degree of oversight or instruction to the IRT on the 9th of November was inadequate?
No.
You don't.
No.
You'd agree, wouldn't you, that the higher the degree of risk, the greater the degree of planning and oversight there should be?
Correct, and staff as well. Yep.
Do you have any reason to doubt it's unfair you might not recall their contents? But if I put it to you that over time your evidence about the degree of risk that you perceived on the 9th of November has evolved, what would you say to that?
Evolved which way?
You have gone from an acceptance that it was high risk, and then in your second statement started to query whether this was just a general duties deployment.
Possibly, I'm not sure.
I want to ask you some questions about the 9th of November now.
Yeah.
It's correct, isn't it, that at around about 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Sean Finnis came into your office?
Correct.
And you knew that Sean Finnis had been contacted by Superintendent Jody Knox?
Yeah, he told me.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know what time, but yeah.
If I put it to you that his evidence was that that call happened at around about 1:30, 1:40, does that sound about right?
Yes, it does.
Now, the next record we have of action by you is a telephone call to Adam Eberl at around about 2:13 p.m.
Yep.
Now, is it fair to say that your conversations with Furness occurred between his call at around about 1:30 and your call to Eberl at about 2:13?
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
What did Furness say to you?
I remember when he came in to me and he asked a question about point of contact, something for IRT, and then he was, I can't really recall. I'd be putting you wrong if I kind of come up with something.
Did he say anything about Superintendent Nobbs?
Yeah, Superintendent Nobbs was on the phone.
Okay. And can you recall what Superintendent Nobbs wanted?
For people to go to you in the move.
And he wanted you to identify those people?
Yeah.
Were you
Did
told
you
that?
go in and have a...
Yeah, I went in. I kind of cut out Sean Finesse as being the middleman, so I went in. His office was next door to mine.
Yeah, so you went in, he was on the phone.
Yep.
And it was a speakerphone.
Yeah, I think I went on speaker, yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You
That's
were
all right.
telling us what you could recall Superintendent Knox saying.
Now, so the first conversation you're having is in your office with Finesse?
Yes.
Okay.
That was just him coming to the door and asking me. And then I think we both went into
All right.
his office.
And you had a conference call then
Yeah,
with Superintendent Nobbs?
yeah.
And what did Nobbs tell you on the phone?
Oh, I can't remember.
All right. Did he tell you whether the IRT would deploy in uniform or in...
Yeah, I actually specifically asked that question.
Okay. And his
I
answer?
said greens or blues, and he said blues.
Okay. What was the purpose of the IRT deployment?
For an arrest target in Yuendamu.
Okay. And who was the arrest target?
Kumanjayi Walker.
All right, and he identified that person.
Sorry?
Did he identify Kumanjayi?
Yeah, I don't know what the words were said. Yeah.
Did you have any awareness of Kumanjayi at that point?
I knew about the axe incident.
You were told, were you not, that there was a funeral on that weekend?
Possibly.
If I put it to you that at page 28 of his second recorded statement, Constable Eberl says that he was briefed by you at Alice Springs about the fact that a funeral was on that weekend. Could you accept that you must have?
If he said that, yeah.
And you were told, were you not, that the nurses had left the community?
I was, yes.
Okay.
I think Superintendent Nobbs told me that.
And that that is one of the reasons that general duty support was required by the IRT or from the IRT.
Well, it's one of the reasons why they wanted more staff, I suppose.
So there was arresting Kumanjayi Walker, but there was also managing the additional property offending that was occurring in Yuendamu.
Yeah, I was told about the property offending as well.
For example, the IRT could conduct patrols of Yuendamu, correct?
Are you saying this was part of the conversation, or are you saying in general, can they?
I'm asking you whether this was something that you were told.
Oh, I can't recall.
Is it possible that you were told?
Yep. I don't know.
Well,
I'm trying to think about it. Sorry.
I'm not suggesting that you're doing anything but your best to remember.
Yeah.
But if people like Sean Finnis and Superintendent Nobbs have written down that they've said things to you in those conversations, you'd accept their accounts as reliable.
Yeah.
It's just the case that you can't remember what was told to you on the night.
So, yeah. Well, it's 3 years ago.
Fair enough. I want to read to you some of Superintendent Nobbs's evidence.
Yeah.
Now, Superintendent Nobbs gave a statement, I believe, on 29th of November 2019, Your Honour, for the record, this is 7-100. And annexed to that statement is, his statement was a recorded statement, and annexed to that statement was a statement he had typed up some time earlier.
Okay.
So this is his recollection within a week or so of these conversations. He says, I provided particular advice to McCormack preparatory to the deployment. Advice on health self-removal from Yuendamu, including details, although not confirmed, as to Remote Health's intent to provide medical services from Yuendamu. Do you recall that?
No.
Except it was said. It could have been said.
I accept that he's said it. Yes.
Do you have any reason to doubt his recollection?
No.
The alleged increase of property crime impacting the medical staff?
Was something similar. He wouldn't have said it like that. But I did know the nurses had evacuated.
What is it about the alleged increase of property crime impacting the medical staff that caused you to question whether Nobbs said it?
I think it just refreshed my memory a bit.
What do you remember him saying?
It's hard to know whether the property bit came from him or came from someone else in the station, or that came after. I did know the nurses had left. I think there was a suggestion that Kumanjayi Walker was one of the offenders for it. I think I do remember that.
I think that there might even be. Yes. The next line reads, the fact that Walker remains outstanding, and although not confirmed, that he is possibly linked to the property crime spike.
So he's using those words he said to me, is it?
I'm reading
Oh, okay.
from his statement.
Yeah,
says,
sure.
"I
Okay,
provide
yeah.
particular
So
advice
what
to
he told
McCormack."
us
Yeah.
was that on about the Monday night after this incident, he started typing up his recollection of all the conversations
Yeah.
and the content of the conversations. So they were reasonably fresh in his memory, but it's not suggested that they're verbatim.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't think those would be those. Yeah, okay.
That he had with
Yeah.
you.
Sorry, that's kind of what I was getting at, those
Yeah,
words. I apologise for
That's
that.
my mistake. I think
Yeah.
that's the way I was asking you the questions. I'm really not asking you whether you have a memory that word perfect these things were said. I'm just asking you whether you remember knowing about these things.
Yeah, yeah.
And whether they could have been.
I apologise for that. Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Now, the next dot point says Walker's YFSF Youth Family Safety Framework links and risks regarding Rakisha Robertson. Is that something you could have been told?
Oh, I cannot recall that. I think the first time I heard about Rakisha Robinson's name was probably after the incident.
Is it possible you were told about potential links or concerns to a domestic partner who was just not identified?
Oh, I can't recall. Sorry.
Now, I asked you some questions about your knowledge of Assistant Commissioner Wurst's involvement in this. This page of Superintendent Nobb's notes says that he then told you that Wurst had approved IRT comprising 4 members and a dog unit comprising general purpose dog and handler for general support deployment to Yuendamu. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that, but I know when the guys came in, when I called them in, I wasn't aware that a dog handler had been sent out to Yuendamu. Where it wasn't, no. Because I would have told them when they came in.
I just want to clarify there. You weren't aware that a dog handler had been approved?
I don't
or
think
the
so.
dog handler had been sent?
Approved.
So your memory is that you didn't think there'd be any involvement from the dog handler?
Not that I didn't think there'd be any involvement in the dog hunt, I just don't remember being told about it.
It then says approval from Wurst that members take non-lethal munitions, beanbag rounds, and AR-15, this was approved. Do you recall that conversation?
I don't.
Do you recall any conversation about munitions?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you recall any conversation about Assistant Commissioner Wurst?
No.
Okay. Then the final dot point says, tasked to McCormack to ensure that IRT were briefed accordingly based on details provided, and that I received written advice to deployment advice stipulating same. This task was complete and email received at 4:24 p.m. A couple of questions about that. Let's take it in stages.
Sure.
Do you remember being tasked with briefing the IRT by Superintendent Knowles?
No, I don't remember that.
Are you saying it didn't happen, or you just don't have a memory?
Well, I didn't really know a lot of what they were going to do to brief them. But sorry, that didn't answer the question, did it?
No.
Sorry.
It's a reason why it might have
Yeah,
been difficult.
I can't recall, sorry.
Can't recall.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question I wanted to ask you, sorry, I might just deal a little bit more with Superintendent Nobbs's evidence.
Yep.
Before Superintendent Nobbs called you, his evidence is
Yeah.
that he made some decisions about whether it was appropriate to deploy the IRT or to approve a deployment. And he's listed his considerations that he says were relevant
at this point in time, so before he spoke to you. One of them is safety of police. It says that Walker had already demonstrated violence towards the police and that he'd received advice from Frost during his conversations, that Walker was known to run, that the arrest plan developed at a local level will be heavily reliant on letting Walker run. And this is the bit that I wanted to emphasise, that there was a need for members to be given respite over the following 24 hours. Did Superintendent Nobbs let you know about the level of fatigue in the university operation on the 9th of November?
I don't think so.
Okay. When you say you don't think so, you don't have a memory of it, or you think it didn't happen?
I can just think back when I called the guys in and I told them they would go out to arrest Walker and bring him back, which that's quite different than they're going to go out and basically look after the station while the members rest.
There is definitely a difference between the two things.
There is.
The next line reads, prior to advancing any plan to locate and arrest Walker, which may not be necessary if he surrenders, I think that follows on. So there's a need for members to be given respite prior to advancing any plan to locate and arrest Walker.
Yep.
As such, any IRT deployment, first priority over the first 24 hours will be general duties, response capability into unit. Is that consistent with what you were told?
I don't recall.
Okay, you don't recall whether you were told that?
I don't recall, and it would... Yeah, I'm kind of thinking... No, I don't recall. Sorry.
I also want to ask you about some of Sean Finnis's evidence. Now, apologise, Your Honour. He had obviously had a telephone call with Superintendent Nobbs.
Is that when I was in the room, or is that a different one?
It sounds like your evidence is he receives the call, he goes...
Oh, yes, sorry. Yep, correct.
I just want to put to you, in fairness, his recollection of what the plan was. He was asked, now, did he, Superintendent Nobbs, tell you anything about a specific plan for the arrest of Kumanjayi? And his answer was, it was proposed that was early the next morning they would go and arrest him. And that was the plan. And that was something that happened regularly, based on my policing experience as well, where things are certainly a lot less frantic in the morning than what they are generally during the evenings, into the late evenings, early mornings. The community is generally asleep. First of all, does that sentiment that arrests in the morning can sometimes be safer, is that something you've heard before as a police officer?
My experience in New Zealand, arrests in the morning were safer. I think working in the Central Desert is probably a bit different.
Now, have you been stationed much in the Central Desert?
Yeah, I was here for 6 years.
Whereabouts?
Alice Springs.
Okay. In remote communities?
No, all my remote community work was up north in Ramangini, well, in Arnhem Land.
So you didn't have any experience in effecting arrests in remote communities?
Not in the Central Desert. I did in Ramangini, yes, and Millingimby, and Croker Island.
Certainly it appears to me, Senior Sergeant Sean Finnis's evidence, that one, that was his experience. Do you accept that?
Accept that, yep.
That's his evidence, I'm not...
Yeah, sure, yep.
And it's also his evidence that he was told this by Superintendent Nobbs.
Yeah, if that's what he says, yeah, I'll accept that.
Is it possible that that is something that was said during the conference call but you just don't remember?
I think I said in my statement that if I knew there was a 5 o'clock arrest, I'm paraphrasing here, that I probably would have called out different people from the IRT.
Wasn't your evidence in your statement that if you'd known that the deployment time in the Frost arrest plan was 11 p.m, you would have let the IRT rest a little bit longer before sending them out?
It's more the fact that the guys I rang, I knew they were on evening shift. That's why I called them as per the roster. So, apart from Tony, I think Tony was on leave. Because generally when you try and deploy people from IRT, you look and see, well, who's actually going to be coming in? So for example, I think I rang them at 1 o'clock, it could have been 1 o'clock, but I knew most of them was going to start at 3. So obviously they would, at some stage, they'd be ready for work. So I'm pretty sure I would have went through the roster like that first. Like, I'm not going to ring people who are on night shift, who are asleep. I wouldn't wake them up.
Assuming that there had been a request for IRT to be deployed there and then to Yuendamu, why would it make a difference if the arrest of Kumanjayi was to occur at 5 a.m?
Because I'd aim for people who were going into days off, or people who have days off so they could maybe get the overtime, and then it'd be less of a, what's the word I want to use? Less of an inconvenience to the general duty staff. Does that make sense?
So is it your evidence that you thought the IRT would be back that day?
Yeah, that's why I organised their cage vehicle, because the view was that they were going to go out, arrest them and bring them back.
All right, same day, in and out.
Well, if possible, obviously.
And if not possible, come back.
Well, no, not come back, because I think they were bringing swags or something.
Isn't it the case that you deployed them until Monday?
No, I can't recall that.
Didn't you tell them that you'd be out for 2 to 3 days?
I thought it was overnight.
So it was overnight?
Possibly overnight.
So they'd be back on the Sunday morning?
Possibly.
Possibly, but not necessarily?
No, not necessarily, but I wouldn't have said 2 or 3 days.
Okay.
Because I think I would have had that discussion over the phone with them, because people might have plans.
So, I mean, I'll put it to you, there is evidence from a number of members of the IRT that at least 2 and possibly 2 to 3 days was the estimate that you gave during your mini briefing at the Alice Springs Watch House.
Okay.
Would you accept that that's what you said?
I'll accept that they said that, yes.
You'd also have to accept, wouldn't you, that the arrest of Kumanjayi Walker was going to be dynamic?
Oh, every arrest is, yes.
You couldn't predict when or where it would happen?
Definitely not.
You couldn't predict whether they'd be back same day or on Monday, Tuesday, who knows?
Correct. I wouldn't have made the promise that they're coming back the same day, yeah.
Okay. So how on earth could that factor into your rostering decisions?
Because of what time I was calling them out.
Okay. Still not sure I understand that, but
Okay.
I'll move on. Can I ask you this? If you understood that there was work for the IRT to do in Yuendamu before arresting Kumanjayi at 5 a.m, wouldn't it have made sense to call the members you called then?
Can you repeat the question?
Well, assuming that Superintendent Nobb's understanding of the plan was that there was work for the IRT to do in Yuendamu before they arrested Kumanjayi Walker. This is the relief work because the station was so fatigued. If you had understood that on the 9th of November, it would have made sense, wouldn't it, to call the IRT in at 2 o'clock that afternoon because there was stuff for them to do in Yuendamu?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
No, I'm not sure whether that would have made sense.
So if there'd been a request, look, I want you to send out some general duties police officers to Yuendamu because the station is really fatigued, they need relief through the night, and then the arrest will occur the next morning, you wouldn't have called in Rolf Hawking-Wiebel and Kirstenfeld?
I probably would have looked at, no. I'm not saying I wouldn't have called them, because sometimes you get what you get.
Yeah.
But I probably would have looked at the roster a bit different. Maybe who's on days off, who wants to get some overtime.
I want to ask you some questions now about the process of making those calls. So I think your evidence is that you did a ring around.
Yeah.
How did in your first recorded statement, you say that there is a list somewhere,
Yeah,
but you know who's on the list and did it from memory.
sure.
Tell me about this list.
The list would be, it's just be the phone list.
Okay, so it's just a phone directory.
Yeah. So we've got a phone directory, Alice Springs members.
Cool. And this isn't an IRT specific document. You were just expected to know who was from
Yeah. Because I think even for some of the members that came out, I didn't have the phone number. So
You relied on them to contact each other.
yeah, some of them, yeah.
But certainly it's, and I think you say this in your recorded statement, it's not on the list who's done what training.
Correct.
It's not on the list who has a particular disciplinary history
Correct.
or is being investigated.
It's just a phone list in Excel.
So you're literally just going down the phone list.
Yep.
And I think that in your recorded statement you said that this process was effectively random.
It was, yeah. Oh, well, I kind of looked at who was off. You kind of go through the roster.
Your word, random.
Yep.
You spoke to Emma Reynolds first, I think.
Yeah.
I called her first because she'd missed out on some previous deployments.
Yep.
At the end, called Paul Henderson.
Yep.
He didn't want to go. You can't remember?
Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, I did. I do remember that. Sorry.
And Sam Tate and Ashwood Everett Smith had both been drinking.
Yeah, they were at a christening.
Nothing inappropriate with that. They were at a baby shower.
No, they're not on call.
So, was there any particular reason why you chose, and I use that word in quotation marks, Rolf, Kirstenfeld, Hawkins, and Ebel?
So any reason why I rang them?
So I suppose what I'm saying is, had those other members picked up the phone, is it possible that you wouldn't have sent out Rolf, Ebel, Hawkins?
Yeah, I just needed 4 people.
Okay.
First 4, and that's it.
And if one of them had been unavailable or had been drinking, you would have kept ringing them?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
And then there could have been an instance where I could have got nobody.
Was there any consideration of the skills or expertise of the members?
No.
Okay.
We've all done the same training.
Okay. You didn't understand it to be your role at all to work out whether the members you were identifying or contacting were suitable for deployment. In the IRT, that was enough.
Yeah, well, they're in the IT, so clearly they'd be suitable.
Your first telephone call was at 4:13. I put it to you that it was to Tony Hawkins. Sorry, I put it to you that it was for Ebel.
I think
Sorry, these are the people who actually accepted.
because I think my first one was Emma Reynolds. Yes.
You then called Tony Hawkins at 4:14. Sound about right?
Yeah.
I expect you to
I'll
remember
agree.
these
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I just want to ask you briefly about the conversation that you had with Hawkins. Was there some discussion, or can you remember whether there was discussion with the members of the IRT about what kit they would bring?
I think I just told them the blue uniform.
Okay. Now, can you remember discussing that with Tony Hawkins specifically?
No.
Can I put it to you that you suggested to Tony Hawkins, or he asked you, look, is it going to be blues or camo? And you said blues.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Possibly. Yeah.
I then want to read you some of his evidence. He says, I think I queried this with him. I was going to say to Shane McCormack, yep, okay. And then Hawkins says, but he said, I'm sorry, I know, but we've been, a higher authority has said to come out in blues and we'll do that. And I said, that's fine. What were you apologising for?
Well, I can't really remember the conversation, but if anything, I probably would have been saying it to cut off the phone call. Sorry, as in this is it. I've got stuff to do.
Okay. So when he recalled you saying, I'm sorry, I know, but we've been to a higher authority, your apology was for ending the telephone call.
The apology was sorry, Tony, I've got other stuff to do.
Okay.
Do you get me? You know when someone's talking, you're like, 50 things to do.
All right. Did you get the sense that Tony Hawkins would have preferred to deploy in his camo?
Oh, I can't even remember the conversation. I'm just guessing what I would say.
Is there a perception in the IRT that it's more fun?
More fun in camo? No, it's definitely hotter.
You then spoke to Rolf at around about 4:22
Oh, yes.
and to Kirstenfeld at around about 4:23. Okay.
Did I call Kirstenfeld?
The CCRs and RCRs suggest that you did.
Okay, fair enough.
I think you thought that maybe you got Rolf to call him.
Yeah, I can't remember if I had Jimmy's number. I know I didn't have Ebel's number, but anyway, sorry, I'll accept it. Yeah.
Maybe you got the number of Rolf.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Everyone turned up in Alice Springs, correct?
Yep.
Can I ask you to describe the muster room?
Yes, it's a long rectangle part of the building. It's separated by a whole lot of two high lockers. On top of that, there's 4 monitors either side. So it's like a partition. 4 monitors either side, and that there's the watch house, or CCTV cameras. So the first bit, as you come in the back door, that's classed as the posse area, because that's where all the auxiliaries come in. I would have given a briefing that day, and then obviously to chat at the end, the debrief, and then past that is generally where all the constables sit.
So that first area, the posse area, that's where you think you gave the briefing?
Yeah, well, that would have been the closest place in the door, and it's where I can see from my office.
What did the briefing involve?
Uh,
Before I ask you that, who was present at the briefing?
It was the 4 of them: Jimmy Kirstenfeld, Tony Hawkins, Zachary Rolfe, and Adam Ebro.
And what happened?
I basically told them, well, I obviously told them on the phone they're going to Yuendamu. I think I told them, they asked what they're going for, and I said to arrest Walker. I think I probably would have said a bit of a vehicle, a cage vehicle to bring him back. Yeah.
You watched the footage?
I didn't.
You didn't?
No.
Okay.
I seen the footage 2 days before.
There was no discussion of risk assessments?
No, well, the view was for them to pretty much get moving and go out and see. I did tell them to go see Julie Frost.
You told her that she would instruct them?
I didn't tell her that she would instruct them. I probably would have told them, because Julie had all the information anyway, so.
Okay.
Sorry, Sergeant Frost.
Where did you think, you would have assumed that there would have been some degree of planning for this arrest,
Yes,
and your evidence is that you certainly weren't involved in that planning.
yes.
Where did you think the planning would occur?
In Yuendamu.
Okay. And in terms of chain of command, who was to be responsible for the planning?
Julie Frost.
You would have conveyed that to the IRT?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. How long did that briefing take?
Oh, we're talking. It was very quick. I had probably 50 other things to do at that time.
Okay. This is all the police auxiliary stuff that you were working on?
That, yes, yeah. And obviously I had to find out, because obviously, you mean, with the police, there's always has to be a record of it, of not so much the briefing, but about what you're trying to organise. So I knew to be something on the RT system for that. So, yeah.
Okay. Did you make any records of this briefing you provided Alice Springs?
No, that was really quick. It was like, well, it was pretty simple. Like, I told them what they need to do. They're going to go out and see Julie Frost. She's got more information for them, and pretty much for them to hurry up and get going.
It's the case, isn't it, that Constable Rolfe provided a briefing to the other members of the IRT?
When I was there?
Possibly not in the posse area. It could have been at the constable's desks, but somewhere within the muster room.
I don't know. It's possible.
Okay. And during that briefing, he showed the footage.
I don't know.
Okay. Did you discuss the axe incident?
When they come in?
When
I can't remember if I said or someone else was the axe incident, or I said it's the accident incident. That's what it was.
Did you discuss how serious it was?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so.
Were you talking about how you thought that the community police officers had mishandled the situation?
What, when they came in? You mean, no. I can't, no.
Did you tell the IRT at some point, or a member of the IRT at some point, that you thought that they had mishandled the situation?
When you say at some point, like, altogether?
You're saying, I mean, before they left.
Yeah. Did I had discussion with someone else about that accident incident? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying at some point in time, I'm asking, it's an open-ended question.
Yeah, sure.
At some point in time, would you have said to one of the members, one or more of the members who were deployed, look, these community police officers really screwed this up?
It's possible. I don't really use those words, but yeah, it's possible. But I don't think anything like that happened when I called them in. If you know what I mean.
When you say you don't think that you used those words, what do you mean? You're not just.
I don't use the word screwed up.
Okay.
I swear a lot.
Are you saying you wouldn't swear about another police officer?
No, I'm saying that if I was to say anything about them, you'd probably have a swear word in it.
Oh, there would be a swear word.
Possibly, I do, yeah.
It's the case, isn't it, that you became aware of the axe incident on the 7th of November?
Yeah.
And
before I called them in, yes.
And I think you say in your recorded statement someone showed it to you?
No. I seen it. I think I seen it in a video in the muster room. Now, so we use body worn, so it's Axon, evidence.com. And I think it's kind of one of those things that it timestamps it and IDs it for a reason. So I'll never look at. I don't think it's fair to look at someone else's evidence over the shoulder. If I want to look at it, I'll log on and look at it. And in that way, it shows a record that I looked at it.
So there should be a record of you viewing the promise record on the 7th of
It wouldn't be promised. You'd find it in evidence.com, which is the Axon software we use for our body worn.
In any event, I think at trial you described what you saw as a high level of violence.
Yeah.
But you thought that things had been handled very poorly by the local members, didn't you?
Did I say that at trial?
I'm asking you.
I had an opinion about it, yes.
Yes. Your opinion was that it had been handled very poorly?
No, my opinion was that I was glad I didn't see a police officer seriously injured or killed.
Okay. But you thought that the community members had effectively put up their hands and done absolutely nothing?
I thought they left it to chance.
But you were critical of them?
I was critical in a way that you're critical when you first see something, but that doesn't mean you don't get a better appreciation about it.
And you expressed that criticism to police officers like Constable?
Possibly.
Prior to the 9th of November?
Possibly.
All right. Can I ask you to have a look at some text messages?
Thanks.
Ask you to accept from me that these are extracts from some text messages that were located on Constable Rolf's telephone. Text messages that you sent to Constable Rolf on the 7th of November 2019.
Yep.
Now at 3:37 p.m. you'd agree that it appears that you said, "I'm sorry, I fucking watched that. Fuck me." And he responds.
Oh, this is my name to his name. Yes.
Yeah. He responds, "Yeah, eh?"
Mm.
And you say, this is a couple of minutes later, "You imagine if that other cop got killed and he stood there and watched it with his fucking hands up. What the fuck have we become?"
Mm.
And Zach Rolfe said, "I know, eh? Fuck my whole life."
Mm.
What you were saying was, what the fuck are these police officers doing?
I don't really. Yeah, I don't know. I can't really answer that.
Okay. It certainly looks like that, doesn't it?
It does look like that, yeah.
Are you saying you just can't remember what you were thinking at the time you sent the message?
Yeah, I can't remember what I was thinking,
It
yeah.
stands to reason that that was the sentiment you and Zach Rolfe shared on the 9th of November.
Are you able to show me the time I actually watched it?
The time that you actually watched
Watched the footage?
It'll take some time. I think we're.
If you don't have it, sorry. Okay, I thought you had it there, sorry.
Are you suggesting that it's possible that this text messages exchange is about something other than?
No, I don't mean that. I mean that is a text message after watching the heat of moment text message.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
All right. Whether it was sent in the heat of the moment or hours after you watched the footage, it certainly sounds like you were being highly critical of the community police officers who had attempted to arrest Kumanjayi Walker on the 6th of November, correct?
Yeah, at that time, I could probably agree with that.
Okay. It stands to reason that that was the sentiment you and Constable Rolfe shared on the 9th of November, doesn't it?
Well, this is 2 days after, so
Okay.
I'm known to kind of say heat of the moment things.
All right. You're impulsive.
Well, yeah, I'm Irish.
Sergeant McCormack, is it possible that you knew that Superintendent Nobbs wanted you to provide general duty support to Yindamu and not arrest Kumanjayi Walker until 5 a.m. the next morning?
I don't know.
Okay. Is it possible that you and Constable Rolfe thought you knew better than the community police and you thought you'd get in and out and show these community police how it was done?
No, because I have worked in community for a long time, and it's a tough job working bush.
Your Honour, I think that's convenient time.
So we'll just take a moment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All stand for a report recess and further.
No,
I won't discuss it.
No, you're all right.
I was just going to say.